Your lips are cracked, and every cell in your body screams for water. You stumble to the nearest stream, cup the crystal clear liquid in your hands, and drink deeply. Within 3 days, you're writhing in agony. Your stomach feels like it's being carved out with a knife. Fever burns through your body. Blood stains everything you touch. And you realize with growing horror that the very thing you needed to live is killing you. This wasn't a nightmare. This was Tuesday morning in medieval Europe. Water wasn't just scarce, it was Russian roulette in liquid form. Every sip was a gamble with death itself. Rivers weren't streams of life. They were flowing sewers carrying the waste, the rot, and the disease of entire civilizations. Stagnant ponds weren't oases. They were breeding grounds for parasites so vicious they could hollow you out from the inside. To be thirsty in the Middle Ages wasn't just uncomfortable, it was terrifying. Because the choice wasn't between thirst and satisfaction. It was between dying slowly of dehydration or dying agonizingly of whatever invisible killer lurked in that next handful of water. But here's what's remarkable. Humanity didn't just survive this liquid lottery. They conquered it. Not with magic, not with prayer, but with ingenuity so brilliant, so enduring, that we still use their solutions today. Today we're exploring first 4 medieval innovations that turned humanity's most basic needs from death traps into lifelines. These aren't the glamorous inventions you learned about in school. These are the humble technologies that actually kept people alive.
In medieval Europe, water wasn't refreshing. It was Russian roulette in liquid form. Rivers ran like open sewers, carrying the waste and disease of entire towns. Stagnant ponds bubbled with parasites that could hollow you out from within. To be thirsty wasn't just uncomfortable, it was terrifying. The choice was never between thirst and satisfaction. It was between dying slowly of dehydration or dying agonizingly from whatever invisible killer lurked in that next handful of water. Then came the hand-powered water pump, and everything changed. Picture a wooden handle worn smooth by thousands of desperate hands. A villager grasps it, throws her full weight into the motion, and listens as the mechanism below awakens. What emerges isn't just water, it's life itself, drawn from depths where no plague could touch it, no parasite could survive. For centuries, wells had existed, but they belonged to the strong. Only those powerful enough to haul heavy buckets up long ropes could access clean water below. Children went thirsty. The elderly suffered. The weak died, but the pump democratized survival. Suddenly, a child too small to lift a bucket could draw water as easily as her father. A widow no longer risked walking miles to contaminated streams. Water wasn't a privilege of strength anymore. It was a right of engineering. Here's what most people don't realize. Medieval battles weren't won by the strongest army. They were won by whoever didn't die of thirst first. Picture a castle under siege. The first thing attackers do isn't storm the walls. It's poison every water source for miles. Dead animals are thrown into streams. Wells outside the walls are seized or destroyed. But inside the castle, defenders simply walk to their pumps and draw water that's been sleeping safely underground, untouched by war or poison. Armies could scorch the earth, but they couldn't steal what was hidden beneath it. The pump gave defenders time, and in medieval warfare, time was the most powerful weapon of all. The brilliance was in its simplicity. Wood for the frame, any carpenter could build it. Iron for the rod, any blacksmith could forge it. Leather for seals, any tanner could provide it. Human muscle for power, something everyone possessed. This wasn't technology that required specialists or secrets. It was survival democratized. And because it belonged to the people, they trusted it completely, learned to maintain it, and passed that knowledge down through generations. The pump solved only half the problem. Even the clearest well water could hide killers so small medieval eyes couldn't see them. You could draw water that sparkled like crystal, and still invite parasites that would devour you from within. Medieval. People didn't know words like bacteria, but they knew clear water could still be deadly water. Their solution was as elegant as it was effective: ceramic water filters. Think of a ceramic filter as an impossibly selective doorman. Water molecules were welcomed through tiny pores like VIP guests, but dirt, parasites, and disease were turned away. No arguments, no exceptions. To people who had watched communities gutted by waterborne plagues, this was miraculous. They poured foul, cloudy liquid into the top, and what emerged was clear, clean, and trustworthy. Creating these life-saving filters required turning humble potters into unwitting scientists. Not every clay worked. Too coarse and water rushed through carrying killers. Too fine and no water emerged, just a ceramic brick mocking your thirst. Medieval potters became masters of invisible calibration. They experimented with clay mixtures, adding sand for porosity, shells for structure. They adjusted kiln temperatures by sight and decades of experience. This wasn't just craft, it was life-or-death chemistry. A mistake meant a family trusting poison with every cup. Success meant a village surviving another year without filling its cemetery with small graves. Filters revolutionized more than village life, they transformed travel itself. Before ceramic filters, journeying meant carrying heavy water supplies or gambling with every roadside stream, but a ceramic filter could fit in a travel pack, turning every suspicious pond into a potential ally. Imagine a family fleeing war with everything in a few bundles. Tucked among their possessions was a ceramic filter, and with it, hope. Wherever they found water, no matter how foul, they could find survival. Water might kill you in days, but food was a more patient assassin. In the medieval world, every meal was calculated risk. Meat spoiled within hours. A successful hunt that could feed your family for weeks might kill them instead if the meat turned before consumption. The cruel irony was that abundance itself became dangerous. Medieval survivors found a way to stop time itself, using nothing but smoke, fire, and patience. Walk into a medieval smokehouse, and you'd enter what seemed like a temple dedicated to survival. Thick, acrid clouds drifted from smoldering fires, wrapping meat in a protective shroud of chemical warfare, because that's exactly what smoke was: warfare against decay. Medieval people didn't understand the science, but they knew the results. Meat wrapped in steady smoke for days didn't rot. It hardened, darkened, and lasted through entire seasons. Different woods gave different results, and communities guarded their smoking secrets like military intelligence. Oak provided slow, steady smoke that penetrated deep. Hickory lent preservation power and rich flavor. Fruit woods gave delicate sweetness perfect for fish. But the process was unforgiving. Too much heat cooked instead of cured. Too little and rot crept back. Every variable had to be precisely controlled through experience passed down through generations of trial, error, and sometimes tragedy. Picture January in a medieval village. Snow piled against doors, fields barren and frozen. Without preserved food, every family faced starvation, but walk into a smokehouse in dead winter, and abundance hung from every rafter. Sides of beef preserved since summer. Whole hams that would feed families for weeks. The smokehouse was a fortress against famine, its walls built of preserved flesh, defended by fire's patient chemistry. Here's a fascinating irony. What began as desperate preservation became culinary art. The rich flavors of smoked meats, the deep tang of smoked fish, the hearty satisfaction of smoked pork were accidental byproducts of fighting starvation. Medieval villagers created these flavors not for pleasure, but survival. Yet those tastes became so prized that centuries later, kings demanded smoked delicacies at banquets. What desperate families developed to avoid death became luxury cuisine for the wealthy. Smoked meat could sustain a family through winter, but it wasn't enough. Medieval communities needed grain, the daily fuel that powered civilization. But grain was devastatingly fragile. A single summer's harvest could vanish before autumn ended. Mold transformed golden kernels into deadly poison. Rats devoured stores faster than armies. Moisture turned wealth into rotting waste. The medieval solution was architectural genius disguised as simple storage. Granaries designed not just to hold grain, but to let it breathe. Medieval builders discovered that grain, like humans, needed to breathe to stay alive. They developed granaries that were marvels of airflow management, structures that moved air as precisely as bellows move flames. Granaries were raised on stilts, creating gaps where breezes flowed freely. Walls included deliberate ventilation channels. Small openings let humid air escape while higher vents drew in drier currents. The entire structure breathed like a living organism. Different regions required different solutions. Coastal areas needed aggressive airflow against constant moisture. Mountain villages used simpler designs blessed with dry air. Desert communities built filtration systems against blowing sand. What united successful granaries was the principle: grain must breathe or it dies. But ventilation wasn't enough. Granaries had to be fortresses against armies of tiny invaders. Walls were plastered smooth, denying rats climbing footholds. Corners were sealed tight, eliminating insect hiding places. Entry points were designed like castle gates, narrow, defensible, monitored. The most sophisticated granaries included trap systems, areas designed to attract and contain pests before they reached main stores. This wasn't just construction, it was warfare against nature's smallest armies. Granaries required dedicated guardians who inspected daily, searching for mold signs, listening for insect activity, checking for rodent evidence. These weren't janitors, they were doctors to the community's lifeline. The responsibility was enormous. If grain failed, people starved immediately. But if seed grain failed, the portion saved for next year's planting, the future itself died. Grain keepers might save more lives than any warrior or healer. Granaries weren't just village survival tools, they were foundations upon which empires were built. Armies marched on stored grain. Castles endured sieges with granary supplies. Cities grew large because granaries made it possible to feed populations beyond daily harvest. Without granaries, medieval civilization would have remained scattered subsistence farmers, never supporting the soldiers, craftsmen, scholars, and artists who built modern society's foundations. As our journey through medieval survival comes to an end, step back and consider what we've witnessed. These weren't the grand inventions filling history books, no famous inventors, no royal patents, no dramatic discoveries. Instead, we've seen something far more powerful: the quiet revolution of ordinary people refusing to accept death as inevitable. The hand-powered pump didn't just draw water, it drew hope from desperation. The ceramic filter didn't just clean liquid, it cleaned the future from disease. The smokehouse didn't just preserve meat, it preserved families through winter's killing embrace. The granary didn't just store grain, it stored civilization itself. What made these inventions revolutionary wasn't complexity, it was simplicity. In an age when most technology belonged to nobles or guilds, these life-saving innovations belonged to everyone. A peasant's child could work a pump as easily as a lord's heir. Anyone with clay and fire could create barriers against death. Perhaps most remarkably, these medieval solutions still work today. When earthquakes shatter water systems, relief workers install hand pumps. When hurricanes flood cities, ceramic filters provide safe drinking water. When power grids fail, smokehouses preserve meat. When supply chains collapse, ventilated storage protects grain. These technologies survived not because they were forgotten and rediscovered, but because they were never replaced. The message from medieval survival technology is both humble and profound. Survival often depends not on the most advanced solutions, but the most reliable ones. Not on complexity, but understanding. Not on what's newest, but what works. In desperate hands facing existential challenges, simple tools became instruments of hope. Wood, clay, iron. And human determination proved stronger than famine, disease, and death itself. These four innovations didn't just help people survive medieval challenges, they laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The villages they sustained became towns. The towns became cities. The cities became foundations of modern civilization, because sometimes the inventions that save us are the ones we barely notice, until they're gone. But medieval survival required more than food and water. It required protection from the elements, from enemies, and from injury itself. In our next video, we'll explore the 3 final medieval innovations that didn't just keep people alive, they made life worth defending.